Imagine a man who spent 27 years behind bars, yet walked out of prison not with anger, but with a smile. A man who could have chosen revenge, but instead offered forgiveness. This man would become the symbol of freedom, the father of a new South Africa, and a global icon for justice. His name, born in a world divided by race and oppression, Mandela's life was not just the story of one man, it was the story of a nation struggling to break free. He was a revolutionary, a prisoner, and finally a president. His journey from a small village boy to the world stage is one of courage, sacrifice, and unshakable hope. Today we step into his life. We'll uncover the roots of his fight, the pain of his imprisonment, and the triumph of his spirit. This is not just history. This is the story of how one man changed the course of humanity. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the tiny village of Maveso, deep in the eastern Cape of South Africa. His birth name, Rolihlahla in Xhosa, means pulling the branch of a tree, or more colloquially, troublemaker. A name that would prove prophetic. Mandela was born into the Thembu royal family. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakanyiswa, was a chief, though stripped of his title by colonial authorities. His mother, Noskeni, instilled in him values of humility and respect. From the start, young Mandela lived in two worlds. On one side, the traditions of his ancestors, rituals, storytelling, and the wisdom of elders. On the other, the tightening grip of European colonial rule and the growing system of racial segregation known as apartheid. As a boy, he herded cattle, played stick-fighting games, and listened intently to the tales of warriors who had resisted colonial domination. These stories planted the seeds of defiance in his young mind. At the age of 7, Mandela began attending a local missionary school. On his first day, his teacher, following the custom of the time, gave him an English name, Nelson. That name would follow him for the rest of his life. But education opened doors. Mandela excelled at studies. He was sent to the elite Healdtown Methodist boarding school and later to Fort Hare University, one of the few higher learning institutions for Black South Africans. There he met other bright, ambitious young Africans who dreamed of breaking the chains of oppression. Yet even as he pursued his studies, injustice shadowed him. At Fort Hare, he was expelled for joining a student protest. This act of defiance was small, but it marked the beginning of a pattern. Nelson Mandela would not accept silence in the face of injustice. In 1941, Mandela fled to Johannesburg to avoid an arranged marriage. The bustling city was a stark contrast to his rural childhood. Here he saw the harsh realities of urban apartheid. Blacks crammed into townships, stripped of dignity, forced to carry passes just to move around. It was in Johannesburg that Mandela's destiny took shape. He worked odd jobs, mine security guard, law clerk, while finishing his studies. But more importantly, he met people who would transform his outlook. Through friends, Mandela was introduced to the African National Congress, the oldest political organization fighting for black rights. He also met Walter Sisulu, who became his lifelong mentor and friend. Sisulu saw Mandela's charisma and burning sense of justice and encouraged him to take a stand. Mandela enrolled in law school, becoming one of the few black lawyers in South Africa. He co-founded the first black-owned law firm, defending those crushed by apartheid's cruel laws. The young lawyer was no longer just a villager's son, he was a rising voice of resistance. The boy named Troublemaker was becoming the man destined to trouble an entire unjust system. But the fight had only begun. By the late 1940s, the winds of change swept across the world. Colonies were gaining independence. But in South Africa, the opposite happened. In 1948, the National Party came to power. They introduced a brutal system of racial segregation, apartheid. Apartheid divided people by race in every corner of life: schools, buses, jobs, even park benches. Black South Africans became strangers in their own land. Mandela, now a young lawyer in Johannesburg, could not stay silent. He and his comrades in the African National Congress Youth League pushed the older leadership to adopt stronger action. Peaceful protests, boycotts, strikes. Mandela rose as a fiery speaker, his words igniting hope in the oppressed. But the regime grew harsher. Police broke up rallies with batons and bullets. Protesters were jailed without trial. Mandela himself was arrested multiple times. The world watched. In 1952, Mandela helped launch the Defiance Campaign, a bold movement of civil disobedience. Volunteers marched into whites-only areas, sat in forbidden seats, and courted arrest. For the first time, thousands stood up together. For the first time, the government felt threatened. Mandela's charisma earned him the nickname, the Black Pimpernel. He moved underground, disguising himself, evading police, leading strikes and rallies. But the struggle was costly. The ANC was banned. Its leaders hunted. Police opened fire on peaceful protesters, killing 69 people. Many shot in the back as they ran. The massacre shook Mandela to his core. He realized peaceful protest alone would not defeat apartheid. The ANC formed a secret armed wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation. Mandela became its commander. Their mission was sabotage, not killing, but destroying infrastructure to weaken the regime. Mandela trained secretly, even traveling abroad for support, but the state was closing in. In 1962, Mandela was arrested for leaving the country illegally. Later, police discovered hidden documents linking him to Umkhonto. The stage was set for the Rivonia Trial. In the Pretoria courtroom, Mandela and his comrades faced possible death sentences. But instead of begging for mercy, Mandela delivered words that thundered across the world. "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." The court did not execute him, but sentenced him to life imprisonment. Mandela was 46 years old. His struggle would continue behind bars. In 1964, he was sent to Robben Island, a barren prison surrounded by icy waters. There, Mandela and his fellow prisoners endured backbreaking labor in a lime quarry. Guards tried to break them with cruelty. Food was scarce. Letters were censored. Visits were rare. But Mandela did not break. Instead, prison became his university. He studied, debated, taught others. He learned patience, discipline, and the art of negotiation. Even in chains, Nelson Mandela's spirit was free. The world outside began to chant his name. "Free Mandela," echoed across continents. But freedom was still far away. The darkness of apartheid deepened, and Mandela's long walk to freedom had only begun. Years turned into decades. Mandela remained locked on Robben Island, but his name grew louder than the prison walls could contain. By the 1970s and 80s, the world began to change. Across Africa, nations had broken free from colonial rule, yet South Africa stood frozen in apartheid. Inside the country, protests erupted. Students filled the streets, workers went on strike, churches spoke out. The government responded with bullets and tear gas, but repression only fueled resistance. Meanwhile, the world joined the fight. Countries imposed sanctions. Musicians sang songs of freedom. From London to New York, people marched carrying a single demand: free Nelson Mandela. But on the island, Mandela's struggle was harsh. He was denied proper medical care. His eyesight weakened from years of quarry work. Letters from his family were rare and censored. And yet Mandela never gave up. He wrote secretly. He encouraged young activists. He held on to hope that one day he would walk free. Then came the turning point. By the mid-1980s, apartheid was collapsing under its own weight. The economy was in crisis. Sanctions cut deep. The streets were ungovernable. The government realized they could not jail an entire nation. In 1985, President P.W. Botha offered Mandela conditional release, freedom if he renounced armed struggle. Mandela refused. From his prison cell, he sent a message: "What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned?" Only free men can negotiate. The regime had no choice but to talk. Secret negotiations began. Mandela, even behind bars, became the central figure in the country's future. Finally, on February 11, 1990, the world held its breath. The prison gates opened. Nelson Mandela walked out, tall, dignified, smiling, holding the hand of his wife, Winnie. After 27 years, the troublemaker was free. Crowds erupted. Cameras flashed. Mandela raised his fist, a symbol of victory, not revenge. But freedom was only the beginning. South Africa stood on the edge of civil war. Apartheid's wounds ran deep. Armed groups clashed in the streets. Many feared the nation would explode. Mandela now faced his greatest test, not as a fighter, but as a peacemaker. He called for calm, for forgiveness, for unity. He sat at the negotiation table with his former enemies, the very government that had once locked him away. It was not easy. Talks nearly collapsed. Violence flared. Yet Mandela's patience and determination guided the process. At last, in 1994, apartheid crumbled. South Africa held its first democratic election. For the first time, every citizen, black or white, could vote. Lines of people stretched for miles, waiting hours to cast a ballot. The impossible was happening. And when the results came, history was written. Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. On the day of his inauguration, millions watched as he took the oath. The once prisoner now stood as a president. But more than that, he stood as a symbol of reconciliation. Mandela invited his jailers to the ceremony. He wore a broad smile, urging forgiveness over vengeance. His message was clear: we must build a rainbow nation, together. The boy from Mbeso, the lawyer of Johannesburg, the prisoner of Robben Island, now the father of a free South Africa. But his story did not end there. His legacy would reach far beyond his presidency. Nelson Mandela's presidency was only the beginning of his larger mission. From 1994 to 1999, he led South Africa through its most fragile years. His government faced impossible challenges: decades of inequality, a broken economy, a nation divided by race and violence. But Mandela's greatest weapon was not law or policy, it was his spirit of reconciliation. He created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Instead of endless revenge trials, victims and perpetrators came face to face. They told their stories, confessed their crimes, and sought forgiveness. It was painful. It was imperfect. But it was healing. Mandela also understood the power of symbols. In 1995, South Africa hosted the Rugby World Cup. Rugby had long been seen as a sport of the white minority. Mandela, wearing the jersey of the Springboks, the national team, walked onto the field, a black president in a white sports uniform. When the team won, the stadium erupted. For one brief moment, South Africans of every race celebrated together. It was a turning point. Mandela had united the nation not just through politics, but through shared pride. By 1999, Mandela stepped down from the presidency after just one term. He could have stayed longer, but he chose to show the world that true leaders do not cling to power. He handed the baton to the next generation. Yet his influence only grew. He became a global statesman, traveling the world, speaking against poverty, AIDS, and injustice. Wherever he went, crowds gathered. Wherever he spoke, hearts listened. Mandela became more than a man. He became a moral compass for humanity. But even heroes grow old. In his later years, Mandela lived quietly with his family, though he continued to inspire through his foundation. In 2010, the world honored him at the FIFA World Cup in South Africa, where the stadium shook with chants of his name. On December 5, 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 95. The world mourned. Tens of thousands attended his memorial. Presidents, kings, and ordinary people stood side by side. The world bowed to a man who had once been a prisoner and rose as a president. But Mandela's story does not end with his death. His legacy lives in every child who learns his name, in every nation that fights oppression, in every voice that dares to speak against injustice. Mandela taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. He showed us that forgiveness is more powerful than revenge. And he proved that one man with enough determination can change the destiny of a nation. Today, Mandela's words echo still. It always seems impossible until it is done. His life was a long walk to freedom, and his footsteps continue to guide the world. If Nelson Mandela's story moved you, share this video to keep his legacy alive. What do you think was Mandela's greatest lesson for our world today? Comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of history's greatest leaders.